Welcome to today's webinar, 5 Lessons Learned, How Progress Improved Its Marketing with Multi-Touch Attribution. We will begin the webinar soon. Thank you. Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, 5 Lessons Learned, How Progress Improved Its Marketing with Multi-Touch Attribution. We will begin the webinar shortly. Thank you. Okay, again, welcome to today's webinar presented by Sojourn Solutions and Progress, 5 Lessons Learned, How Progress Improved Its Marketing with Multi-Touch Attribution. Just a little housekeeping, please submit any questions through the Q&A option in your webinar toolbar. We will address your questions in the Q&A scheduled at the end of the webinar. And we'll also be sharing on Sojourn's Twitter at Sojourn_SOLNS. Join us on Twitter with the hashtag SojournWebinar. All webinar attendees will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. And then today's speakers are Carmen Gardner, Director of Marketing Operations at Progress, and Dan Vauder, Managing Partner at Sojourn Solutions. Carmen, would you like to just share a little bit about yourself here?
Sure. My name is Carmen Gardner. I'm Director of Marketing Ops at Progress. My team just manages all of the marketing technology at Progress, and oversees the alignment of that technology with other teams and systems.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And then Dan.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome everyone. So I am Dan Vaughter. I am a managing partner here at Sojourn Solutions. My background is primarily marketing automation, but I've spent a lot of time with analytics and data. About 5 years ago, I founded Sojourn with 3 amazing marketers, and ever since then, we have been helping other marketers reach their business goals. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. All right, the agenda for today's webinar, we're going to start out talking about marketing attribution and providing a definition and some more information on that to set the foundation for the webinar. And then we'll go into Progress's journey, the catalysts for that, and then as well as the timeline. Carmen will walk us through that. And then we'll get more into the 5 lessons learned in their multi-touch attribution journey, and then go into final thoughts. So with that, Dan, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, thank you. So lots of folks on the call. I imagine that there are lots of different definitions. So thought it best for the sake of this call, we're going to consider attribution to be a process, a set of technologies maybe that assigns revenue credit to marketing and sales touchpoints that are tracked throughout the buyer journey. So it's often a set of processes and tools that you can use to focus your marketing efforts on what is actually working versus not. And it helps you maybe understand when to focus, where to focus, maybe across channels, products, services, and maybe the types of customers that you have. So to illustrate a little bit better, this is kind of the challenge, and bear with me here. So what we've got on this slide is a representation of maybe an account that you might be trying to market and sell to. So the little people icons across the top, what we're representing there is maybe 3 different people that you might be marketing and selling to throughout, and then the major milestones of that marketing and sales cycle from first touch all the way to closed won and then beyond. And then all of the different channels, marketing channels, maybe sales channels and touch points throughout that account journey or buyer's journey. So this is the challenge. When we're trying to figure out what's working, we've all probably looked at one time or another at, gosh, what was the last touch point right before the opportunity shifted to close won, or what was the source of the lead that started this whole process. But generally speaking, there's so many touch points within this account's journey that moves it towards that buying decision that leaves blind spots. So this conversation today with Carmen is about how they address this. And with that, I'd like to kind of find out where everybody on the phone is today as far as this particular topic. So I'm going to launch a poll here. So the question here, you all can see that, I assume. There we go. So where are you now in your marketing attribution journey? Last touch, yep, there we go. Probably the most common so far. First touch is up there. Multi-touch, we've got a lot of multi-touch attribution folks on, that's great. And even some with multiple models. Well, that's great. So a pretty diverse mix of folks on the call today. I'm going to go ahead and end this now. So let's go ahead. I'm going to share these results. Let's go ahead and dive in here. So next slide. Oops. Okay, Carmen, let's talk a little bit about what started the journey at Progress Software. What was kind of the impetus for, I guess, this whole process that you embarked on? How long ago did it start? Maybe we can start there.
Sure. Well, about 2.5 years ago, like most organizations, we had last touch attribution out of our CRM, and we were pretty content that that was the only story to be told, that was the only story we could model attribution and ROI off of. But then new C-level management came in and asked about first touch attribution and ROI, and to be honest, we really didn't have a story for that.
Got it. So I guess what happened next? How did you go about finding the right vendor, the right partner? Tell us a little bit about how that process unfolded.
Well, at first we thought we could get first touch ourselves. We could build a solution in-house. So we cobbled together a first touch solution out of our marketing automation system and passed that to our CRM, but it was really difficult to maintain. It took a lot of effort, and it still didn't give us the ROI that the executives wanted. But the one thing it did lead to was more questions. Once people could report off of first touch, they started talking about other points in the journey that we really didn't know about. So we soon realized that we needed to find people smarter than we were that had a commercial solution that could help us get to multi-touch attribution.
And did you find that right vendor right away, or did that take some time?
We did our research and we found a vendor, but we didn't find the right one immediately, actually. We failed, and we failed fast. But then we rallied and found a vendor that worked with our systems and our business needs.
Got it. And when you found that right vendor, how long did it take to actually implement and get it rolled out across your organization?
Once we found the right vendor, it only took a few months for the technical implementation piece, but then we felt like we had to wait a few months for the data to accumulate before we could create any actionable reports off of the information. So we waited a few months after implementation and then rolled out training and reporting to our demand gen and field marketing teams.
Got it. Do you have, tell us about user adoption and training, that particular part of that process. How did that go? Is that still ongoing?
It is still ongoing. We're finding more and more users every day. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but the training is ongoing. It never ends.
Okay, well, it never ends. Okay, so I guess just overall, would you say that this is working at Progress Software?
It is. Actually, what I meant when I said it never ends is that we find new insights every day. We find a new and interesting way to use the information that we have, and we find a different department that can benefit from the insights that multi-touch attribution has. So we find we're always training new people on the system that we hadn't considered could use the information. Being able to see so much information about what activities contribute to the buyer journey and all of the people involved just really fuels everyone's curiosity, and we keep coming up with new ways to use it.
Excellent. So let's dive into the lessons that you learned as you went through this process. So lesson number one, C-level sponsorship is a must. Talk about how having a C-level sponsor helped pave the path for change there at Progress.
Well, luckily we did have C-level sponsorship. I couldn't imagine doing this without C-level sponsorship, only because it took a village. I mean, every time you think you have everybody in the room you need to have in the room, you find someone else you should have in the room. So done right, it's going to require commitments from almost every department in your organization: marketing, sales, web, finance, BI, social, pretty much everyone. So, you know, in order to get everyone in the room and make it a priority for everyone, I think you really do need the C-level sponsorship.
So is that really what you think would be the breaking point in a project like this if you didn't have the C-level? Then I guess it's the lack of being able to get all of these folks with the same priorities in the same room, or where do you think that breaking point would be?
I don't know if I would call it a breaking point, but it would definitely be a challenge. I don't think our timeline would have been as short. It would have been severely impacted if we had to deal with competing priorities. With so many cross-functional departments involved, without an alignment of priorities, it would have been difficult to get this project completed as quickly as we did. Not that we couldn't, but it really would have been a challenge to get everyone together.
Were there areas of the organization not within your sponsor's area of responsibility that had to be won over, would you say?
I wouldn't say we had to win any department over. Honestly, once we started talking about and evangelizing what multi-touch attribution was, everybody was really excited and curious to learn about the new technology, but we certainly leaned pretty heavily on a few departments. The web team had to be heavily involved because you come to quickly find out that 80 to 90% of your attribution is going to be digital. So we had to get the web team involved to make sure that the tracking scripts played well with our forms and our CMS, to make sure QA and testing was done. Also, we had to lean on the demand gen teams. They needed to be trained to tag their promotions and their campaigns with appropriate UTMs, tagging scripts, source scripts, so that we could build reports the way that we knew we wanted to see them. But luckily, we had gone through that training process when we previously had implemented first touch attribution that we built in-house. We had already trained them on how to use UTMs to track their marketing programs, but it was really just a follow-up training to make sure everyone understood how important it was. And lastly, finance. We leaned a lot on finance to play a role in this, because something about multi-touch attribution is you also have the ability to get ROI out of it if you could tie spend to the campaigns that represent the touch points along your journey. So finance had to play quite a big role in getting us all of the budget and spend data for every marketing department.
Got it. So folks on the call are probably thinking to themselves, gosh, if I was to go talk to my CMO about the level of effort that they would have as we went through a project like this, like, what would you say? Like, when, in your particular case, when did the CMO need to get involved throughout the course of this journey that you've been on?
Well, apart from making it one of our goals for the year, making sure everyone knew that it was a goal for the business, and of course, budgeting dollars towards the expense, she really just stood behind the scenes and played a supporting role for us every step of the way. She would check in and make sure that we didn't hit any speed bumps, gave us permission to fail when we found that a vendor wasn't working, and just let us pull back and find another vendor that worked for us. So she really just played a support role. And she drove the final vision of what value we would get out of multi-touch and ROI, what she wanted, what her end goal was, which was visibility into marketing's role in the customer journey, giving them credit for the campaigns that they run and the work that they do, and also insight into how to optimize their spend and their efforts.
Got it. This is an interesting bit of research that we did in conjunction with eConsultancy a few months ago, and I thought this would be applicable to this particular lesson. So essentially here, what this shows is that many of your peers, so these were B2B marketers that were surveyed, quite a few of them, and what they indicated were that markets and customers are constantly changing. And this is across all B2B companies. And really what this shows is that with all of this change for your markets and customers, you need to be able to adjust and understand what's working across all of your different marketing channels and products, services, et cetera. And so this really illustrates well, I think, the need for attribution. And then with all of the change required throughout this, the need for that C-level, I think, is just this kind of underlines the importance for that C-level sponsor for this process due to that change. So I thought that was interesting. The next lesson here is seek early buy-in across the organization. So Carmen, tell us who was involved early on in the project, and how were those decisions made about who to include early on?
Well, we knew this would be a two-part process, implementation and then rollout. So for fear of bringing too many cooks into the kitchen and suffering analysis paralysis, we began with only the players we really needed to implement the solution. So marketing ops, the web team, engineering, some developers, and sales ops, which is in charge of the BI team for reporting. And once we had a working solution, then we began to onboard the demand gen and field marketing teams in that interim where we were just waiting for the data to accumulate.
Got it. So what do you think? Was this the right choice? Or if you could do it over again, would you involve more people, different people? What do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I had the C-level sponsor, perfect. I had a project manager, great. But I think what I was missing in those early days was an evangelist. So someone on the demand gen team who was excited about the idea of multi-touch attribution and was willing to act as an early adopter. Someone who was willing to take what we learned from multi-touch and kind of experiment, trust the data and experiment by investing more in what we found worked and what we didn't. Because by not involving the end users in the early implementation phase, I think our adoption timeline suffered because they didn't get to see how it was built from the ground up. They didn't get to wade into the water. I feel like they kind of felt like they were thrown in a bit with all of this information, and they didn't have a peer to say, hey, everybody, come on, let's jump in.
Yes. So how do you think, so not including those stakeholders, I guess, how did that impact the timeline just overall, do you think?
Well, like I said, it was a trade-off. So while having just a core team on the implementation phase, that positively affected the timeline for us. We were able to get up and running in a matter of a couple months. But in the end, I would have brought more people in earlier. It negatively affected our adoption and onboarding because it's a big leap between last touch and multi-touch attribution. I would let them see how everything was built so they would understand how important it is to tag things correctly, why they're doing this extra work in tagging their programs correctly, entering their information into finance correctly so that we could join their spend with their campaigns and everything like that, I think it would have really helped.
Yeah, that's a tough question. Next, lesson 3, select your vendor very, very carefully. So we kind of alluded to this earlier. Tell us, how did you go about this process?
Well, we do what I think most people on the phone would do. You do your research. It's a new technology, so we didn't know what we didn't know. We did our research. We sat in on demos. We spoke to Gartner and peers, and we settled on a solution that we thought would work for us. However, a few weeks into implementation, we realized it wasn't going to work with our CMS, the way we processed our forms. I see there's a question in the QA about exactly what happened. Like I said, most of attribution is digital, so every multi-touch attribution vendor is going to give you a script you're going to put on your web pages to track attribution. The way our forms worked, the fields weren't readily named. They were masked. So the code couldn't programmatically attach its attribution to a person. So that's kind of where our disconnect was. Our email field isn't named email. It's coded. So we couldn't figure out how that would work. So we were given permission to fail, and we found a vendor that could work with our engineers. Their engineers worked with our engineers to figure out a way to repost that data in a way that the vendor could consume. And once we got that down, we were up and running. So we learned a valuable experience from that first failure about, how much attribution relies on accurate tagging on your website. And if you do have good engineers on your team to work with their engineers to make sure that every digital touch point is tagged and to help you QA, that will go a long, long way towards not only adoption, but buy-in.
Yeah, that makes great sense. So I think it would be really helpful to understand a little bit more about maybe what some of your key requirements were as you were going through this process, probably especially the second time.
Right. So that was another benefit of going through it the second time is at the beginning we didn't know what we didn't know, but then as we learn more and more about what multi-touch attribution can bring to us, we knew it could track online digital touch points, but we also needed to be able to track offline touch points, obviously like events or third-party content syndication, things like that. Needed to understand how that worked. We also wanted to be able to track some sales activity, outbound telemarketing and things like that. So we really wanted to be able to track every touch point, whether digital or offline, across the journey.
Got it. I think to support how difficult this can be, we dug up this particular screenshot here. So if you search for marketing attribution tools, you will get a lot of results. So we got 69.1 million results. So this is definitely one of those things that doing your research is going to matter. And so thank you for sharing that, Carmen. So let's talk about lesson number 4 here. Measure and celebrate key milestones. So what were some of your early wins?
Well, our first win came almost immediately and from the most unexpected of sources. We had assumed that multi-touch attribution was mainly for our demand gen and field marketing teams, but one of our product marketers saw the tool and found that it could also track incoming landing pages. So that had been an ask that had been on my desk for a while, being able to show ROI for content like blogs, customer stories, and things like that. And we'd never really been able to do it and just kind of shelved it as something that we may be able to get to later. But with multi-touch and the ability to view incoming pages and referral data along with the touch points, we could show how blogs and other content that we created kind of fit into the customer journey and ultimately contributed to ROI. So he was thrilled with that.
That's fantastic. So how long did that take? And yeah, I guess maybe as you kind of moved through that process, how long did it take you to achieve some of maybe this early win and maybe some of the subsequent wins?
Well, the longer you have the system, the better the data gets. Obviously, you're collecting more and more data, and especially with regard to first touch attribution. First touch begins the day you implement. So for us, it was that day. And of course, people have been interacting with us previous to that, but we had to put a line in the sand and say, okay, everyone was born on August 8th. And then moving forward, the more data you get, the better results you have. So our second win actually came with AdWords, which is our biggest spend in marketing and our biggest kind of blind spot, because we have AdWords conversions, and then we're always trying to kind of sync that up with our CRM's leads and conversions. So using UTM coding, we can now prove the AdWords, in fact, did play a part in the customer journey, a bigger part than we ever expected, because the first touch model that we cobbled together previously was really first touch form fill. So we could really only measure it once they filled out a form. But with multi-touch attribution, first touch is truly the first time they find you, the first time they come to your website, whether they fill out a form or not. And so that provides even more valuable insight with how people come to you, whether they interact with your form or not. And then when they come back and fill out a form, you get all of that rich data. So now that we had that data, we could tell exactly which ad campaigns were driving top of funnel and which weren't, regardless of what Google Analytics is telling us, and make good decisions on what to invest in and what not to invest in from there.
Interesting. Did that help you gain momentum for further wins?
It did. It did. It's hard for marketers to trust data in a construct and in a system that they don't know. So I think having a couple of quick wins like that really helped not only user adoption, but just trust that the data was correct, because it's not like your CRM reports. It's not going to tell you what that report tells you for a reason. It's telling you something else. And especially if the news is bad, it's really hard to trust. So I think these wins kind of helped build a trust factor in the data, and now we're using it across the business.
Wonderful. Self-service works is our 5th lesson today. So tell us, Carmen, so how did you roll out there at Progress Software? How did you roll out all of this, all of these reports, et cetera, to all of the different stakeholders that needed to eventually get them, and then get them to the point where they could derive actionable insights from that reporting?
Because one of our requirements was that whatever solution we chose, the data lived in our CRM. We could build reports and dashboards out of our CRM specific to each product line. We have a number of different product lines with a number of different goals. Some are more transactional, some are more enterprise-wide deals. And then for ROI, we built Tableau dashboards. So we could get information from our finance system, we could get information from Salesforce and show ROI. So then we held training sessions with all of the marketers with this data, and we made sure that the reporting was tailored to their product line's needs to get rid of any noise. And we went through the process of comparing what their reporting would look like at last touch attribution and what that would tell them. And then all of the questions that they could answer with multi-touch that they couldn't answer with last touch.
So in order, I'm just imagining this in my mind, in order to gain adoption across all of these different folks, because I know there's a lot of them there, excuse me, like what did you do? Did you have support sessions with them? Did you have office hours? How did that work? How did you actually get them to the point where they're using it regularly and relying on it? As I said, it's a big leap for someone to go from last touch to multi-touch journeys. It's easy to tell the story and understand in an abstract way that there are many people in the buying cycle and they can perform many interactions with you or touch points. And it's easy to explain this story, but then once you get to a report, I think that's where it gets a little difficult. So we did have a number of training sessions, office hours, people could come, and we could just take a look at the reports and talk about what it's telling us, what it's not telling us. But really, my suggestion is before pulling up a report, have a question in mind. Don't just pull up the report for the sake of pulling up a report and asking, did my campaign work? Which I think is what we're used to doing. So come up with a question. So I'm spending X dollars on AdWords. Where can I optimize? What can I stop doing? What should I do more of? How do I increase mid-funnel conversions? That's a good question. And then you pull up the report with this specific attribution model. They'll give you insight into what works and what doesn't. I think it's a great way to get people used to start to reading the tea leaves, so to speak. And secondly, we just began incorporating marketing attribution reportings into marketing's weekly metrics meetings. So it would spark conversations around campaigns that we saw that worked really, really well and brought in a lot of ROI, and campaigns where we really didn't see any attribution along the funnel. That sounds like really good advice. Were there any, or maybe there still are there any laggards that are still resisting, or have you pretty much wrapped up adoption?
No, we haven't. There's always questions, and it's going to take constant exposure to really get people used to seeing the reporting and seeing the data. There's always going to be someone that, doesn't trust it, finds an issue with it, and that's okay. That's okay. But the bulk of our people are just really curious about it. And I said every day we find a different way that we can use the information.
Got it.
Yep.
So, Carmen, are there any recent insights that end users themselves have come up with that you can share with us?
Yes, actually, a recent insight was the ability to help us map customer journeys. I mean, I know that sounds obvious, but until you see it, it's really impressive. So we've noticed during our reporting on content that a lot of content from one product line is influencing the sale in another, what we thought was wholly unrelated product line. Even though we know the audiences were a little bit similar, we really hadn't seen that data before. So it really opened our eyes to the idea of mapping cross-product journeys that many of our prospects take and how to take advantage of that. We find that especially at the top of the funnel, people will come in and look around for one product and end up buying another. It's fascinating. So it's helping to create cross-product, cross-sell plans.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So this is an example of a report that you might see when looking at multi-touch attribution. Carmen, could you, so this is something that you mentioned a few minutes ago. There's a significant difference between maybe putting a standard campaign performance report on somebody's desk versus a report like this. Can you maybe talk us through this report just to kind of illustrate that particular challenge a little bit better?
Sure, and this is a pretty basic report. It's actually really interesting because it looks like it's a report for a specific opportunity. So it's telling you the story that Kathleen came to the site for an AdWords paid search ad, first touch, didn't fill out a form, just came by and left. And then Arthur picked up, came via LinkedIn and filled out a form. And on and on. You could see different people coming and going through different channels, filling out forms. Then Tony Fernandez got called by a BDR, and that's when the opportunity was created. So that's really, really important to include sales activity in this journey, because if that sales activity hadn't been tracked, then perhaps that opportunity creation touch point would be credited to that email, right? Which really wouldn't be the true story. And so more people fill out forms from a number of different touch point sources, and then eventually Kathleen goes to a conference, probably sees a demo, and goes to a dinner, and the deal is closed won. So I think the left-hand side of this report is fascinating and easy to consume, and it tells the story. It's the right-hand side where I think people need a shift in thinking. So here you have the revenue of the deal. It looks like it's $40,000. And the credit that's given to each individual and each source, depending on the revenue model. So the W-shaped model is showing you first touch, lead creation, and opportunity creation, and it stops there. And full path is showing you W-shaped plus closed won. So you can see how the credit is broken up between them based on the different model. So as a marketer, if I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, AdWords was responsible in the full path model for $9,000 worth of revenue on a $40,000 deal. What does that tell me, right? So are you saying that's a $9,000 deal? Is it a $12,000 deal? No, it's getting $9,000 worth of credit on a $40,000 deal. So in the full path model, if you're measuring the entire funnel, AdWords, depending on the amount of money you spend on that source, is getting credit where it probably would not have gotten credit in your typical last touch journey. It would have been ignored totally, but it's an important part of the journey. If Kathleen hadn't come to you, then these other players may not have come to you, and then the entire journey would not have happened. So it's important to know why these numbers are the way they are and what the attribution models are really trying to tell you.
Thank you for that. Fantastic. So I see there are some questions kind of queuing up here. We'll get to those in just a minute. First, I would like to do another poll. Okay. What are your biggest challenges to successfully implementing marketing attribution? This will be interesting because some of you are quite far along the journey, and some of you are very early. So this will be interesting to see how this turns out. Yes. Very interesting. So MarTech platform options are overwhelming. That seems to be the #1 result there. I'll go ahead and end it. I guess #2 is people are too busy to take on anything new. Yeah, so there's that C-level sponsor, the need for that C-level sponsor. And then #3, lack of planning and a vision of what success looks like. Maybe that's part of the C-level sponsor bit of that as well. Excellent. Okay. Let's see if I can advance here. So final thoughts. Carmen, what do you think?
Well, if I were to give advice to anybody that is starting on this journey, I think the first thing you need to do is be curious. I think what helped us a lot was we have a lot of really curious people on the team, and once they got a taste of it, they wanted to know more, and they had more and more questions, which was really refreshing. So just be curious, and don't be afraid to fail. You're not saving lives here, so when we failed, we found a way to make it succeed. And it's a journey. You're not done. We find new ways to use this technology every day. I think the technology is evolving every day as well, but it's really been valuable in giving us insight into things that we thought may not have had value in the past. So I think next, what we plan to do is fold in sales activities, like that BDR touch point, and see how that changes things for us, and analyzing shopping cart sales. We have a number of products where you could buy products off of an online shopping cart, and we really don't have a buyer journey for that. So I think we'd like to fold that into this as well.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you, Carmen. That was fantastic. We're going to get to questions here in just a second. And by the way, if you would like to learn more about attribution, we will be at B2B Marketing Ignite on May 27th and 28th, so you can join us there. Okay, so questions. Let me see if I can pull these up here. Uh-oh, I may need help. Can you see them, Carmen?
Dan, I have them.
Perfect. Thank you for rescuing me.
That's what I'm here for. Yeah, so we have one question from the audience is, does your team Carmen, does your team offer different attribution models, first touch, multi-touch? If so, what are the benefits?
Yeah, our technology gives us insight into first touch, which is a web visit, regardless of the form fill, lead creation, which is the first form fill, opportunity creation, and closed one, when the deal was closed. And the benefits to each is first touch is so important. It's something we've never been able to measure before, but often people come to your site and they do a lot of research. You know, you've heard of the stat that 80% of the buying process is already done before someone even fills out a form. So it's really important to know what people are looking at, what brings them to their site, and who they are and what's sparking their curiosity. So first touch and lead creation is really important for top of the funnel activities like AdWords, and I keep saying that, but that's our biggest spend, that at a last touch model looked like it was doing miserably. But it's really doing great. It's doing what it's supposed to do and bringing people to our site. And the full path model with opportunity close helps us kind of see the kind of things that help mid-funnel, which is so hard. You could throw leads into the top of the funnel until the cows come home, but if they don't make it to the bottom, then what's the point? So getting insight into that middle of the funnel, what converts things down to an opportunity is really important. But then when an opportunity is created, figuring out what that pipeline acceleration, how to get that opportunity closed. Is there anything marketing can do to help close that deal, whether it's a trade show, taking them out to dinner, providing a Gartner white paper, or whatever it is really important. And then our technology allows you to define a custom model too. So once we got a lot more comfortable, we defined our own custom model where you can shift the weight to the bottom of the funnel because that's what we really want to know about rather than the top. So in a long-winded way, that's what's beneficial to us.
Oh, no. Great answer. Thank you. And then a quick follow-up to that one, and I'm trying to go in order for everyone. There's a couple hands raised as well. A quick follow-up to that question. What tools are you using to store the data? And I assume that means the attribution data at this point.
Yeah, all of our data is stored pretty much in our CRM, but we do pull it out to a data warehouse and use Tableau just to be able to pull in data from other systems and maybe create custom definitions that we don't have in our CRM, like filtering out certain opportunities and things like that, and getting into a really pretty self-service format for the executive team who may not live in our CRM, and they're used to seeing dashboards in Tableau. But I think most vendors also offer a data warehouse that you can access if you don't have one already that you could build reports off of. But that costs money.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. And then we're going to go to one of our callers. I apologize if I don't pronounce this correctly, but Fiombera, if I unmute your line there for a question. Oops, let's see. Unmute. Is it letting me unmute? Maybe it's not. Apologies. While I'm troubleshooting that, let me go to the next question. We have another question. At the end of the day, are the stats and attributions per channel really that different between last attribution reports and multi-touch reports?
Yes. Yes, they are. So the last touch reports tell us what channel the person last participated in before the opportunity was created. And those are typical channels. It's going to be an email, it's going to be a webinar, it's going to be a trade show, and that's great. But you also have marketing channels whose goal is not necessarily to create an opportunity, especially in an enterprise-wide sale where multiple people are involved. It takes a year to close. You have a big journey, a bigger journey. So if you take all of your money and you throw it into email or you throw it into that webinar or trade show, then you're really going to be doing yourself a disservice to everybody else. So you need to know how to get people in the top of the funnel, buyers, not just creating leads, but people who are going to be influencers, evangelists, maybe not the person that signs the check, but the person probably doing the research for the person that's going to sign the check. So knowing who those people are and developing personas around those people, that was another big insight for us in product marketing, is they have personas, but this was able to validate their assumptions that at the top of the funnel, maybe you have a developer that's doing research and coming in through a different channel than the analyst that you're really thinking is the buyer that's actually creating the opportunity. So you do get so much more information about who's involved in the buying cycle, where they're coming from, and what they're interested in seeing.
Okay. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Thank you, Carmen. All right, so I think that answers that one. And I am trying to troubleshoot some of these others. Let's see. Here's another question. How are we doing on time? We're doing good. So does your vendor offer one platform to manage all attribution models, or is it an in-house custom-built platform?
The vendor offers the 4 attribution models, well, actually 5. First touch, actually 4. First touch, U-shaped, which is first touch and lead creation. W-shaped and full path, and then they offer you a custom model that you could build yourself and apply different weighting to along the journey. So the vendor has all of that taken care of. Thank goodness we don't have to build that in-house.
Yeah, I've heard some stories of people trying to do that, and I think they're still recovering, honestly. Let's see. Thank you, Carmen. So we do have, I'm going to try to allow one of our callers to talk here, see if I can get this to work again. Marion, do you have a question? Are you unmuted? Nope, for some reason it's just that part of it's not working. I apologize, folks. Well, that wraps up the questions that we have. Let's see. For right now, it looks like. Let me just check one more time. Oh, so I have another question. There's a huge challenge in managing UTM values across our business. So just in managing, you had mentioned, Carmen, how important UTM values and were in this whole process. They're having challenges from consistency to adoption across the business to the tools they're using. What's working well for you to do that?
Yeah, so, you know, we did come up with a naming convention for UTMs and standardized values and things like that. And we built a UTM builder on an internal form where people, the marketers can choose, you know, what is their product, what's their channel, what year is it, what quarter is it. And if they choose all of those values, it'll build the UTM codes for them, which I think has been really helpful, not only user adoption, but standardization. But my team, Marketing Ops, is kind of the last line of defense in making sure that those UTMs are correct. So if something comes through us, say for an email or AdWords or whatever, we also check to make sure that the UTMs are there and that they are consistent with naming conventions. But it's not a 100% foolproof process either. You know, 95% of the time it works 100% of the time, but it helps cut down on the list that the marketers have to do when creating those.
Absolutely. I like that last line of defense. Marketing Ops is the last line of defense in this. So that'll have to go into a tweet later. Let's see, one more question here. It's about kind of resources and time. So can you give us just an idea of how much of your time was spent in support of this initiative when you moving to multi-touch attribution kind of throughout the journey, and then maybe how much time, just estimates, your various teams spent as well? I know that's a big challenge we see with customers all the time.
Are you talking about for implementation or ongoing?
I think, let's say implementation for this.
It took one full person from my team to project manage and herd the cats and get everything together and make sure that the people were in the room. I think for the web team, the lift wasn't very big for very long. As soon as we figured out how to get the scripts to work with our forms, I would say it took probably a couple weeks for the web team to work with our engineering team to work with their engineering team to make sure that the scripts played well together.
Okay.
And so for the marketers, I think that took the most time in training, in QA office hours, in learning to use UTMs and things like that. So I think for the marketers, at the beginning, it was more, we had 2-day training sessions for each team and ongoing office hours, but now the lift is nothing. It's part of what they do every day.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was a heavy lift for any, right, I don't think it was a heavy lift at the beginning for any one department. It's just a lot of departments, a BI department to create reports, sales ops to get fields in the Salesforce, or our CMS, or CRM rather, that kind of thing. So it just took a lot of people.
Yeah, and actually to follow up on I think some of the tools question here, Carmen. Thank you for that. We have a question on, could you would you be able to share the name of the attribution tool that you were using along with the marketing automation tool and what you've done to create your UTM builder?
Yeah, our marketing automation tool is called Visible. I think they're owned by Adobe. And our marketing automation tool is Eloqua, which we love. And our CRM is Salesforce.
And then the UTM builder, that was a custom build in-house?
Yeah, it's just an Eloqua web form with some drop-down boxes. Once we knew what our naming convention needed to be, it included like product, vendor, communication channel type, things like that. Once we knew what that was supposed to look like, we just created an in-house Eloqua form with some drop-downs with those standard values that the marketer could pick from. And when they choose the values, it just builds a UTM at the bottom of the page, or it builds a query string rather at the bottom of the page that they could just copy and paste or send to the vendor or paste in their email or whatever they needed to do.
Okay, and we can share some more information in a follow-up email with everyone on that. That sounds awesome. One last question, I'm not sure how much time we have left. Having conquered attribution, what are your main challenges keeping you awake now?
Well, I haven't conquered attribution. No. And it doesn't keep me awake. It's not a worry. It's something that's really helping our business. So I certainly would never say I conquered it. There are definitely gaps, still gaps. I mean, every time you get something new, you're going to ask more questions and you're going to see what's possible. So I guess what keeps me awake at night is I know sales contributes to the journey somehow. How do I fold them in without inundating the journey with sales activity? Which sales activities are really important and which ones aren't? I think that's something that we're really struggling with. We want to give sales credit where the credit is due, but not inundate every touch point with a sales call or follow-up or email. And then figuring out that untouched funnel, figuring out the journey for people who never talk to a salesperson and maybe never even fill out a form, but they buy online. Certainly there's a journey story to be told there. So those two things, I think, keep me up at night because I don't have an answer.
Well, thank you, Carmen. I realize we are 1 minute after the hour.
Yep.
If we've not been able to answer your questions, we will definitely follow up to you directly, and then we will include all details that we can as well in follow-up emails with a link to the recording. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. We really appreciate it, and have a good afternoon.
And thank you, Carmen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carmen.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.